Okay, welcome again. We'll be studying session 29 this week, and let's begin with our now customary invocation and gratitude. Beginning with those of Ra, let's offer our thanks. Thank you for being our teachers, for being our guides. Thank you for your demonstrated dedication to those of us behind the veil on earth. Thank you for helping us shine more light on the full picture of what's going on. Thank you also to those fellow research for sharing Ra with us, with the world. Thank you also to our own inner guides, our connection to truth, knowing how to sort out what resonates and what doesn't. Find our way forward. And thank you to those of us gathered here in circle, supporting each other in spiritual community. And of course, so much gratitude to the one infinite creator, all of it. The one that centers everything. Thank you. Okay, session 29. What I was thinking is if somebody could read the first 10 Q&As up through 29:10. That sounds good to me.
Check a thing with you, BJ?
Sure.
Are you leaning towards trying to get us through the whole thing today, or?
Yeah, I'd like to see if we can.
Okay.
Not to push it if it's if we can't, but okay. Yeah.
Works for me.
See if we can. Hey, it's 3:33. Anybody want to kick us off? Reading up through 29:10?
I can start.
I can.
Oh, go ahead, Caroline. You got it.
All right. I end with 20. Do I read 2010?
Yes, 29. Okay. Yep.
Yep. Okay. February 23rd, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. We communicate now. 29.1 questioner. Is our sun, this planetary system as we know it, a sub-Logos or the physical manifestation of a sub-Logos? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. 29.2 questioner. Then I am assuming this sub-Logos created this planetary system and all of its densities. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is incorrect. The sub-Logos of your solar entity differentiated some experiential components within the patterns of intelligent energy set in motion by the Logos, which created the basic conditions and vibratory rates consistent throughout your, what you have called, major galaxy. 29.3 questioner. Then is this sub-Logos, which is our sun, the same sub-Logos, but just manifesting in different parts through the galaxy, which is it all the stars in this galaxy? Ra, I am Ra. Please restate. 29.4 questioner. What I'm saying is there are roughly 250 billion stars or suns, something like ours in this major galaxy. Are they all a part of the same sub-Logos? Ra, I am Ra. They are all part of the same Logos. Your solar system, as you would call it, is a manifestation somewhat and slightly different due to the presence of a sub-Logos. 29.5 questioner. Now, all of these, let me be sure I'm right then our sun is a sub-Logos of the Logos that is the major galactic Logos, correct? I am Ra. This is correct. 29.6 questioner. Are there any sub-Logos that are found in our planetary system that are Logos that are sub to our sun? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. 29.7 questioner. Would you tell me what one of those, would you give me an example of one of those? I'll call sub-sub-Logos. I am raw. One example is your mind, body, spirit complex. 29.8 questioner. Then every entity that exists would be some type of sub or sub-sub-Logos. Is this correct? I am raw. This is correct down to the limits of any observation, for the entire creation is alive. 29.9 questioner. Then the planet which we walk upon here would be some form of sub-sub-Logos. Is this correct? Raw. I am raw. A planetary entity is so named only as logos if it is working in harmonic fashion with entities or mind-body complexes upon its surface or within its electromagnetic field. 29.10 questioner. Okay. Do the sub-logos such as our sun, do any of them in our major galaxy, do they have a metaphysical polarity, shall we say positive or negative, as we've been using the term? I am raw. As you use the term, this is not so. Entities through the level of planetary have the strength of intelligent infinity through the use of free will, going through the actions of beingness. The polarity is not, thusly, as you understand polarity. It is only when the planetary sphere begins harmonically interacting with mind-body complexes, and more especially mind-body-spirit complexes, that planetary spheres take on distortions due to the thought complexes of entities interacting with the planetary entity. The creation of the one infinite creator does not have the polarity you speak of.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody have somewhere you want to begin?
Am I to understand that the logos is all of the galaxies, major galaxies? What do you specify in your own understanding of the raw material as the logos with a capital L?
Yeah, Aaron. You're muted.
Sorry. They don't cover that answer in this session, but they do at one point talk about something they call the primal logos. And I think the primal logos is distinct from what in this session they call the logos. And the logos in this session, they're referring to the entity that's sort of the spiritual core of a galaxy, of our galaxy. But there does seem to be a deeper level to the tree of mind that goes one level deeper. That's a single being that creates the whole universe, all the galaxies. And they call that the primal logos.
Do you remember how that primal logos, or my question is not clear yet. Sean, you go.
Did I understand correctly that not so? Okay, so the logos in this session is the galaxies, and then I think Don is like, okay, so the sub logos is the sun. Is every sun the same sub logos? And then Ra is like, no. Is Ra saying like not every sun, or not every star in the galaxy is a sublogos? Like our system is special in that our sun is a sublogos, but not every star system, or not every star is a sublogos. Is that, did I interpret that right?
Go ahead, Aaron.
What I was going to say is that's differently than how I interpret it. I think the distinction they're making is quite simple. They're just saying, not every star in the galaxy is the same sublogos. Every star is the same logos, but each star is choosing some form of specialization within the natural laws of the galaxy to kind of zoom in on. Because Don's question is, are all the suns the same logos, or is our sun the same? I forget exactly how they say it or how Don says it, but Don said specifically, is our star part of the same logos? And Ross
He said sub-logos.
Sub-logos, right. And Ross says, no, but all the stars are part of the same logos.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I read it.
Yeah, but then he goes on to say your solar system is a manifestation somewhat and slightly different due to the presence of a sub-logo. So I had a similar curiosity come up there that I had never considered, that it sounds like is what Shang is saying, oh, maybe not every star is a sub-logos. I have always interpreted it to be that every star is a sub-logos, but it sounds like Ra's saying our solar system is slightly different because of the presence of a sub-logos. Maybe not every solar system is a sub-logos.
They might,
I wonder about
when we
that.
read further in this session, we might get some more insight into this, because they talk about some of the stars don't ever leave the logos. Some of the stars don't leave the creator or something like that. And that may or may not be relevant to that question.
Yeah.
It's kind of a
Other
paradox,
thoughts,
it seems to me. I just want to say that the whole concept of the logos, it feels tightly interwoven with the concept of galaxy. And you guys remember, earlier in the Q&A, earlier in the sessions, there was this confusion because Ra would say galaxy meaning solar system, and Don didn't catch it for a little while. And I think it's the same thing with logos. It's like logos just means creator in a way. Logos means an individuated creative principle that has chosen something to explore in the manifest realm. So it can mean different things in different contexts, and it's a bit paradoxical.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to think in like analogous terms of how do you make some sort of metaphor out of this, and trying to think the logos is Home Depot with all the supplies, and then the sub-logos is this thing that can go into Home Depot and try to then build a house just based on the supplies that are inside the logos. And then we live inside the house as sub-sub-Logoi to then we just get the basic building blocks for the house, and then we live, and then we teach the sub-logos, okay, with those supplies, this is how we're able to survive. And then as technology gets better, then there's, the electric chainsaw that gets added to the Home Depot store, and then all the sub-logoi want to try the new chainsaw or new idea. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm trying to humanize this a little more.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
Yeah. Me too. Oh, you got a thumb bubble.
I know, all these auto weird.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sean.
Does anyone hear code? No. Okay. The metaphor that I always understood this as is it's like nesting of coding languages. So you have the base language. So I don't know, Python or C or something. And then within that language, you can create libraries. So I don't know, the universe is based off, I don't know, maybe the universe is just computer language. And then each galaxy makes their own programming language. And then within each logos, you have libraries that are created based off of those, based within that language. And then the sub-sub logos start building applications out of those libraries. That's, I don't know, that's how I understand it. It seems to make sense because every layer lower can't change the rules. It has to work within the rules of the upper layer.
Yep. When in your analogy, Sean, there's also specifically, language, and wasn't it in the last session? I think it was last session where Ra talked about how how the logos kind of built into itself the language, or I don't know, I'm not quite remembering if it was the logos or if it was Yahweh, but the way that they were able to encode into the experience of its evolving entities language that's going to, what will eventually evolve as language, that was something that was built into the densities that creates language. So I think that, the whole connection with language is actually really, it's really ripe. That metaphor is really ripe.
Sean, your hand is still up. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I have another question. This
Okay,
is about
and then we'll get to you, Nia.
the planets, sorry, Ross said something about the planets working with human. Was the question like, is a planet a sub-logos? Was that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Ross says, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
Which that seems strange to me. Like, at some point, does that mean, okay, so does the logos have free will? Is that a defining characteristic of a logo? So logos is a focus of love and expression. Is there free will component also inherent in a logos?
I think so. I think it's definitely like it's part of the creator exploring choice and like diversity and interests. Like that's a prime feature. It's my interpretation.
Is what Ross, okay, there's a couple of things I'm trying to potentially, there's a couple of interpretations I'm trying to work through. One is like only planets that have things like mind body spirit complexes or mind body complexes working on them are considered to be sub-sub-Logos, or like there's that some point within the process it just suddenly gains, it like it just gains free will. Like spontaneously it gains free will and then suddenly it's a sub-sub-Logos. I'm trying to understand like what's going on with the planets here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've wondered that too. Aaron, did you raise your hand to respond?
I did.
Yeah, let's take responses to when or how does the planet become a logos or logoic?
So 2 points. One, in the directly out of 29.9, Ra's comment about this is a planetary entity is so named only as logos if it is working in harmonic fashion with entities. So it's like, to me, the way I take that is that it's not just that there's people on the planet. It's like, basically, it's usually, I think it's not until fourth density that a planet wakes up to its like self-consciousness as an entity, as a planetary entity, and then it becomes a sub-logos in cooperation with its planetary citizens, like the people who are, who have already been evolving as sub-sub-Logoi. Like as soon as they become kind of unified, certainly unified in their seeking, positive or negative, and then potentially unified in their mode of service, not until then does a planet become a sub-logos or logoic. And I think one of the clues that I think of in this whole question is the idea of complexity. Like if you remember the logoi who hadn't extended free will into the people, into the mind body spirit complexes, they weren't mind body spirit complexes at that point. They were just mind body spirits, and the mind was not complex. And I think what that means is, I think complex in this context means like, I want what my logos wants, and I want what I want. And that's some complexity. So before there was a veil in the mind, the entities in third density just wanted what their logos wanted. They didn't have their own sense of free will. They didn't grasp that they could choose anything but what their logos would want. But as soon as the mind was veiled, then we each hold now a complexity of desire that includes what our logos and sub-logos desire and what we desire on top of that.
This is fascinating. There's a whole thing to think about. Cool. Any other responses to Shang's question? We're ready to move to Nia. All right, what you got, Nia?
Well, I had two things, and actually they both relate to the two things that Shang brought up, so that's perfect.
Yeah.
So I'll respond to what we were just referring to. I think, so I have this picture in my mind's eye around mind, body, spirit complexes over the last few thousand years, let's just say. It feels very much to me like, I take the indigenous peoples around the world over the last few thousand years very much had a matriarchal societies in mind and looked at ourselves as being part of Mother Nature as creator, meaning Gaia being that we were not separate from. I mean, our indigenous, we still that's still a very much woven into of the same fabric as our planetary mother being. So there's also other cultures that looked to the stars and they looked to creator as being separate from themselves. They looked outside themselves. They looked outside of nature for answers. So I feel like there's kind of a yes and with that. There has been a divide and there has also not been a divide. So that to me is a picture in my mind around when Gaia could have become more self-aware and been more in tune with our mind, body, spirit complexes as entities, both of the same beingness and also without the same beingness, if that makes sense. So the other thing I wanted to say with that was the Shang, your mention of coding. I do Python with my kids, so I have a very clear understanding of language-based programming in that sense, and I feel I feel in tune with that as well, specifically with the let's see, was it 29.8 questioner? Then every entity that exists would be some type of sub or sub-sub-Logos. Is this correct? I am Rob. This is correct down to the limits of any observation. For the entire creation is alive. I thought of quantum physics. Immediately, when it was limits of any observation, we can now observe quantum levels of things, and that feels very much in tune with the language aspect of programming, looking at blueprints within infinite energy and infinite intelligence, and then what we can and cannot do actually. And then the Home Depot comes in around free will with, I love that analogy because it comes into, here's your supplies, but without the blueprints, you don't know how to make them into a home. And there's a lot of free will experimentation. And it felt a lot to me also like programming and blueprint and free will choice. And yes, our Mother Earth having her own consciousness around those things and awareness of self and being in tune with. So I don't know that I stated that all very clearly. It was great in my mind and it didn't come out that way, but it feels super woven in, like I have this understanding I just can't explain.
Thanks for giving it a go. Any responses to that? Or I think maybe let's keep reading. Aaron, do you want to pick us up at 29:11, and then I think let's read through 29:22.
Okay. 29:11, questioner, thank you. Yesterday, you stated that the planets in first density are in a timeless state to begin with. Can you tell me how the effect we appreciate as time comes into being? I am Ra. We have just described to you the state of beingness of each logos. The process by which space-time comes into continuum form is a function of the careful building, shall we say, of an entire or whole plan of vibratory rates, densities, and potentials. When this plan has coalesced in the thought complexes of love, then the physical manifestations begin to appear. This first manifestation stage being awareness or consciousness. At the point at which this coalescence is at the livingness or beingness point, the point or fountainhead of beginning, space-time then begins to unroll its scroll of livingness. Questioner. As the love creates the vibration, I will make this statement first. Let me say, I believe that love creates the vibration in space-time in order to form the photon. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is essentially correct. Questioner. Then the continued application of love, I will assume this is directed by a sub-logos or a sub-sub-logos. This continued application of love creates rotations of these vibrations, which are in discrete units of angular velocity. This then creates chemical elements in our physical illusion, and, I will assume, the elements in the other, or what we would call non-physical, or other densities in the illusion. Is this correct? I am Ra. The logos creates all densities. Your question was unclear. However, we shall state the logos does create both the space-time densities and the accompanying time-space densities. Questioner. What I'm assuming is that the rotations, the quantized incremental rotations of the vibrations show up as the material of these densities. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is essentially correct. Questioner. Well, then because of these rotations, there is an inward motion of these particles, which is opposite the direction of space-time progression, the way I understand it. And this inward progression, then, is seen by us as what we call gravity. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is incorrect. Questioner. Can you tell me how the gravity comes about? I am Ra. This that you speak of as gravity may be seen as the pressing towards the inner light love, the seeking towards the spiral line of light, which progresses towards the Creator. This is a manifestation of a spiritual event or condition of livingness. Questioner. Now, gravity, we know now on our moon is less than it is upon our planet here. Is there a metaphysical principle behind this that you could explain? I am Ra. The metaphysical and physical are inseparable. Thus, that of which you spoke, which attempts to explain this phenomenon, is able to, shall we say, calculate the gravitational force of most objects due to the various physical aspects, such as what you know of as mass. However, we felt it was necessary to indicate the corresponding and equally important metaphysical nature of gravity. Questioner. I sometimes have difficulty in getting, you might say, a foothold into what I am looking for in trying to seek out the metaphysical principles, you might say, behind our physical illusion. Could you give me an example of the amount of gravity in the third density conditions at the surface of the planet Venus? Would it be greater or less than Earth? I am Ra. The gravity, shall we say, the attractive force, which we also describe as the pressing outward force towards the Creator, is greater spiritually upon the entity you call Venus due to the greater degree of success, shall we say, at seeking the Creator. This point only becomes important when you consider that when all of creation in its infinity has reached a spiritual gravitational mass of sufficient nature, the entire creation infinitely coalesces, the light seeking and finding its source, and thusly ending the creation and beginning a new creation, much as you consider the black hole, as you call it, with its conditions of infinitely great mass at the 0 point from which no light may be seen, as it has been absorbed. Keep going?
I think so. I was planning to go through 22.
Okay. Questioner, then the black hole would be a point. Am I correct in saying that it would be a point at which the environmental material had succeeded in uniting with unity or the creator? Is this correct? I am Ra. The black hole which manifests third density is the physical complex manifestation of this spiritual or metaphysical state. This is correct. Questioner, thank you. Then when our planet Earth here gets fully into fourth density, will there be a greater gravity? I am Ra. There will be a greater spiritual gravity, thus causing a denser illusion. Questioner, this denser illusion then, I will assume, would increase the gravitational acceleration above the measured 32.2 feet per second squared that we now experience. Is this correct? I am Ra. Your entities do not have the instrumentation to measure spiritual gravity, but only to observe a few of its extreme manifestations. Questioner, this I know, that we can't measure spiritual gravity, but I was just wondering if the physical effect would be measurable as an increase in the gravitational constant. That was my question. I am Ra. The increase measurable by existing instrumentation would and will be statistical in nature only and not significant.
Thanks. Sean.
What is spiritual gravity?
Aaron.
I think spiritual gravity is the creator's desire to be united with itself.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's funny because this is so interesting to me. This is such a ripe session to compare Walter Russell's cosmology and Ra's
I
teachings.
knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, I know you knew I was going to say that. Because Walter Russell, as you guys remember, says that there's the creator has two desires: the desire to create and experience, and the desire to be unified. And they're seemingly at opposition to each other, because to create it has to sort of create the illusion of separation from itself. It can't have relationship unless it creates some context for there to be two. But it's one.
Right.
It's one thing. There isn't two. There's only one. So it has to create an illusion of two so that it can experience relationship. And that is the desire to create. And the second desire is to is to be true to itself, which is oneness. So like those two desires are the primal dual forces that create the entire universe. And I wonder if that's what Ra is talking about here, and that spiritual gravity is the creator's desire to return to itself. Like gravity, physical gravity would be the creator's desire to manifest form, to create suns and planets and people and photons. And then spiritual gravity is the creator's desire to return that form back into the undivided state.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I just want to chime in to say that's exactly what I was thinking, that spiritual gravity is like sometimes I think of those two that Walter Russell talks about as like the desire to dream and the desire to wake up. Yeah, so I agree. Caroline.
Well, it struck me when I was listening to these questions that gravity in our three-dimensional plane is always something, or at least not always, but it seems to be apparent to me, things go downward. But in spiritual gravity, things go upward. And so I think about like the chakras, the energy centers and things like that. And this reaching this octave to where we all ascend into this beautiful, beautiful situation of oneness where gravity, I kind of think of us as becoming like part of this black hole, that we are absorbed back into ourselves. But when I think of like the comparison of our physical sense of gravity here, where obviously things drop toward the earth, in spiritual gravity, things ascend upward. And so that's kind of how I wrap and I think of like this return to oneness as like the pinnacle experience that we're all moving towards, where we all become that black hole sort of. This is just how I envision it. but I always think of things in our own interpretation here as in reverse, spiritually speaking. Whatever earth is, it's the opposite. I just feel like I live in this state of polarity, and that really resonates with me, is that what seems to be of earth quality, whether it's physical or metaphysical, it's going to be reversed or inverted in this other plane we talk about in consciousness. But it's the rise upward. It's a different type of gravity to me.
Yeah.
Can I say another thing that builds
please.
on this? And again, I apologize for folks who haven't, who haven't made it through the Russell material, because it's hard to, it might be hard to get what I'm saying, but I just want to pull out that, like, in the Russell cosmology, there's a set of inner planes and there's outer planes. And these are like metaphysical structures in reality, in the universe. And the inner planes, he also calls the inertial planes. And the inertial planes divide God's mind from God's body, like divide God's thought from God's manifestation. And it's the plane, I think, when in the Hermetic teaching of as above, so below, that's the plane of above and below. Like that's what's that. Like I've always wondered, like, what is above what, below what, within what, outside of what, outside of the inertial plane, outside of what divides space-time from time-space. And in the Russell teachings, it's the inertial plane. And what he describes is when God thinks of something and desires it, that thought and that desire impact the inertial plane, and then out comes vibration, which creates the form of it. And that's how creation comes about. And so also in that teaching, there's two interpenetrating spirals. And I think this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about the upward and the downward facing spirals is how Ra calls them. And one of the spirals begins on the inertial plane and moves towards the center of form, moves towards the center of suns and photons. And then the outer planes, the spiral is the downward spiral and begins in the center of form and returns to like deep space, essentially, or the inertial planes. Anyway, I apologize if that doesn't land, because I know it's bringing in material we're not reading right now and studying, but I just wanted to call that in because it feels really, it's one of the biggest intersections of these two teachings that are so interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, Caroline.
Well, that kind of led me to what Aaron was just saying. In one of the responses from Ra, he says that they say the gravity, shall we say, the attractive force, which we also describe as the pressing outward force towards the creator, is greater spiritually upon the entity you call Venus, which I thought was so fascinating when I heard that. Due to the greater degree of success, shall we say, it's seeking the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I resonate with this partly because in my human design, that was a planet of origin for me. And I've often pondered if this is a planet of the embodiment of unconditional love. Is that true? That Venus was a planetary system that was very much about unconditional love? Does anybody know?
I don't know. I mean, I know like in mythology on this planet, Venus is also often considered to be related to love. And of course, that's where Ra had their third density experience, and they had a very loving experience.
But I kind of, I'm adding also, thank you for that response, adding to the thought of spiritual gravity as this pressing outward force toward the creator. I'm just, creation is infinity, but I really like that response in 2918.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sean?
In in 2920, Ross says that greater spiritual density causes a denser illusion. What do they mean by a denser illusion?
Aaron.
I think it's the density of light, which is also synonymous with the density of truth, of unity. So dense meaning like more, it's hard to describe, but yeah, more light, and light meaning truth, light meaning like wisdom, the knowledge of the creator being at the center of all things.
I kind of think it's like less distortion, perhaps. Like closer to origin, maybe. But yeah, I agree with Aaron, like just in terms of how we've heard Ra use dense before. They mean dense in the opposite way that we tend to use it. Like
right.
we mean more dense in the mass, in the matter sense, and they mean less dense in the matter sense, more dense in the light or the space or the whatever it is that creates, that's prior to matter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I want to make another comment real quick about that. In the next density, in fourth density, the way I understand it is that what happens in fourth density typically is that the body complex forms of the entities who are, experiencing fourth density evolve from matter-based to light-based. Like in the beginning of fourth density, the bodies they'll start off on Earth, they'll start off as like these kinds of bodies, generally speaking. But by the end, by graduation into fifth, I think the bodies will be kind of like optional. Like entities at that point can have a physical body or not. And in fifth density, they're light bodies. They typically don't have bodies of that physical matter, chemical vehicles at that point. They can manifest them if they need them, but typically they just, in space-time, fifth density vehicles are light-based. Which would be a more dense, from Ra's perspective, would be a more dense body form. And it's just counterintuitive to us because, like BJ was saying, we tend to use dense as meaning like more physical or more gross matter, but that's the opposite of what Ra means.
Yeah. How about we read the next section?
Can we pause just for a second? There was some, let me just scan. I think there were some things I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
Yeah, the black hole. That's interesting. Because in 2919, Ra says, the black hole which manifests third density is the physical complex manifestation of this spiritual or metaphysical state. The black hole which manifests third density, what's that about? Anybody have any insight or thoughts about that?
So, I've always thought, well, first let me add to what you said. Like, I remember Ross saying like stellar black holes are different from galactic supermassive black holes, which I thought was really fascinating. That they're like fundamentally a different. And Ra doesn't say why. He just says, "Oh yeah, they're different." But with a black hole, when you pass across the event horizon and you actually fall into the black hole, once you're inside the black hole, my understanding is that you literally watch the entire universe pass. The way that time and causality breakdown and the way that light falls into the black hole, there's it's something about like you get to experience the rest of the universe. And I always like sometimes when I'm bored and thinking about law of one, I think like, oh, the perspective of the creator is from the inside of the black hole. Like they are seeing the whole universe. Like it's and also like I've seen computer simulations of what it's like to fall inside a black hole, where like the universe, it's, you see it as like this ring, right? Like you are now like the entire universe, instead of like our experience of the universe is we look out, but from inside the black hole, looking out of the black hole or towards the universe, you're looking into like this tiny little bubble or sphere, which I think is fascinating, because that it's there's this remember when like the astronauts first went into space and they looked onto Earth, and they're like, oh my god, like the Earth is so small and fragile. And there's this one astronaut who was like, everyone needs to like come out here and look down on Earth and realize like he was like, whenever you see like a politician arguing about something stupid, I just want to like grab him by the scruff of his neck, bring him out here there and be like, look down on this Earth, you dumb motherfucker. like stop bickering about the stupid things. And I think the perspective from inside of the black hole is exactly the same, but from a universal perspective, where like you look at it and then the entire universe is just this little bubble and you get to see it all at once. Yeah, but then the limits are like the black hole only gets to see there are limits of what every black hole can see, right? Because of the expansion of the universe. It's only within like, I don't know, there's some caveats to that. Anyways, I don't know if that's just what I think on the topic.
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking from 2919, the black hole, which manifests their density, is the physical complex manifestation of this spiritual or metaphysical state. And the metaphysical state is environmental material had succeeded in uniting with creator. Or that's the way Don put it. And then it sounded like Ra was agreeing with that. So the metaphysical state of complete unity, and then the black hole, which manifests their density, is the physical complex manifestation, like is the out picture of complete unity. So I was kind of taking it to mean like how eighth density becomes first, or creates again, like once everything's brought back together and there's complete oneness that has been informed by a universe that has expanded and then become one, then that creates the physical out picture is a black hole, which creates the dream again, creates the 10,000 things. I don't know if that's right, but that's the way I took it. Aaron, and then Neil.
So I'm going to pull this picture up here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but this is from The Secret of Light. And this is like, this is an abstract representation of what Walter Russell says.
Aaron, will you just pin your picture? I don't know if you can, but I think you can.
No,
I think that'll make it so the video, like in the upper right, there's 3 little blue dots.
Yeah, what do I say?
Pin. I think that'll make it so that in the video, your picture will be big.
I pinned mine. It's big for me, but it may not work for you guys.
Never mind. Carry on.
Okay.
They'll be able to see it well enough.
I mean, yeah, you guys can pin my my little box if you want to. It might make it bigger. Yeah. But I think there's enough, hopefully there's enough detail just to show the general idea here is that this is the pattern of creation at every scale of every logos. So
according to Walter Russell.
According to Walter Russell. So a galactic logos creates in this way, creates galaxies in this way. A solar logos creates suns in this way, and then all the way down to a photon. Like they're all created in the same way of what Walter Russell calls the octave wave. And so this is the octave wave, and what they say, and again, notice that there's 7 densities here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's 7. And at each of those circles, each of those 1, 2, 3, 4 positive, and then 3, 2, 1 negative, there's a phenomenon that sounds exactly like what Ra says. Between the densities of experience, there's like a pressure wall. I don't remember how Ra says it, but Walter Russell calls it a pressure wall. And these are like locking potential, like no matter can pass through these. And I wonder, this whole conversation about black holes, I wonder if that's literally the same thing we're talking about. Like when Walter Russell like maps this pattern, if between the densities, between each density, there is something like a black hole, or there's something through which light cannot pass. Anyway, intuitively it feels like that's what we're talking about, but I just wanted to share that in case it helps other people form a picture or build understanding.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Neil?
I just want to say, I don't know, I had a thought, but for some reason, the thought of the black hole just brings about fear, like this, I don't know, fear of just being pulled into nothing. And I don't know where that's from, but I thought that was interesting. And then the council is said to be made up of beings from the next octave, and then they are here in our council. So it makes me think that there's this 8th density being that's able to shoot through the black hole into the next octave, see what's going on, and then shoot back and say, okay, let's, do the quarantine on Earth so that they can work their way towards the black hole into the next octave, or some sort of, I don't know, it was a thought of this just alien floating through a portal and then coming back and kind of looking like, okay, like how's everything going in this octave? And yeah, but I saw Nia's question too of the white hole, and I was wondering if that kind of is on the other side, or if anyone knows anything about that.
Yeah.
I mean, my understanding of the white hole, black hole, theory comes from Nassim Haramein in the Resonance Project, and the white hole would be suns and photons. The white hole would be the formed thing, and the black hole would be the sort of like the energetic condition behind it. Like the theory is that there's a black hole that is entangled with every photon, every proton in the universe. Every proton is also like meets the condition of a Schwarzschild black hole. Like it's been proven that it meets the condition of a black hole. And so the white hole is the form, and the black hole is the energetic condition that's behind the form. That's my understanding of that theory.
You want to read the next section? Cool. So picking up at 2223, I think there could be lots of good places to stop. Yeah, I kind of was debating where to stop. How about somebody start us off at 2223, and then we can figure out where to stop as we go. How about I'll read?
Great.
Okay, 2223. Questioner. Okay, now as the creation is formed, as the atoms form from rotations of the vibration which is light, they coalesce in a certain manner sometimes. They find distances, interatomic distances, from each other at precise distance, and produce a lattice structure which we call crystalline. I'm guessing that because of the formation from intelligent energy of the precise crystalline structure, that it is possible by some technique to tap intelligent energy and bring it into the physical illusion by working through the crystalline structure. Is this correct? I am wrong. This is correct only insofar as the crystalline physical structure is charged by a correspondingly crystallized or regularized or balanced mind-body-spirit complex. Questioner, I don't wish to get off on subjects of no importance or subjects that don't lead us to a better understanding of our mechanism of growth, which lead us to things that are not transient. But it's difficult sometimes to see precisely what direction to go in. I would like to investigate a little bit more of this idea of crystals and how they're used. I'm assuming then from what you said that in order to use the crystal to tap intelligent energy, it is necessary to have a partially undistorted mind-body-spirit complex. Is this satisfactory, or do you need, is this correct? I am wrong. This is specifically correct. Questioner, there must be a point at which the removal of distortion reaches a minimum for use of the crystal in tapping intelligent energy. Is this correct? I am wrong. This is correct only if it is understood, shall we say, that each mind-body-spirit complex has an unique such point. Questioner, can you tell me why each mind-body-spirit complex has this unique point of distortion ridding? I am wrong. Each mind-body-spirit complex is an unique portion of the one creator. Questioner, then you are saying that there is no single level of, shall we say, purity required to tap intelligent energy through crystals, but there can be a wide variation in the amount of distortion that an entity may have, but each entity has to reach his particular point of what I might call energizing the ability. Is this right? I am wrong. This is incorrect. The necessity is for the mind-body-spirit complex to be of a certain balance. This balance thus enabling it to reach a set level of lack of distortion. The critical difficulties are unique for each mind-body-spirit complex due to the experiential distillations, which in total are the, shall we say, violet ray beingness of each such entity. This balance is what is necessary for work to be done in seeking the gateway to intelligent infinity through the use of crystals or through any other use. No two mind-body-spirit crystallized natures are the same. The distortion requirements, vibrationally speaking, are set. Questioner, I see. Then, if you are able to read the violet ray of an entity, to see that ray, is it possible then to immediately determine whether the entity could use crystals to tap intelligent energy? I am wrong. It is possible for one of fifth density or above to do this. Questioner, is it possible for you to tell me how a crystal is used by an entity who has satisfactorily achieved necessary violet ray qualification, I will say, how it is possible for the entity to use the crystal or how he should use the crystal? I am wrong. The gateway to intelligent infinity is born of, shall we say, the sympathetic vibration in balanced state, accompanying the will to serve, the will to seek. Questioner, but can you tell me precisely what the entity would do with the crystal to use it for the purpose of seeking the intelligent infinity? I am wrong. The use of the crystal in physical manifestation is that use wherein the entity of crystalline nature charges the regularized physical crystal with this seeking, thus enabling it to vibrate harmonically and also become the catalyst or gateway whereby intelligent infinity may thus become intelligent energy. This crystal serving as an analog of the violet ray of mind, body, spirit in relatively undistorted form. Should I pause there? It's a lot.
Seems like a good place to
I
pause.
mean, they can, yeah, okay. They do continue with, yeah, but let's pause. So crystalline structure and using crystals. So let's talk about the distortion ridding. The point at which the removal of distortion reaches a minimum for use of the crystal in tapping intelligent energy. What are they talking about? What is that about?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so I was just reading from 2925 and 2926. So the way Don put it was there must be a point at which the removal of distortion reaches a minimum for use of the crystal in tapping intelligent energy. And Ra says this is correct only if it is understood that each mind-body-spirit complex has a unique such point.
Can you clarify, like, crystals? I mean, I'm thinking of like crystals that we see, you know, in the spiritual community. Is that inclusive in this conversation here? Or
Yeah, I think they're talking about physical crystals, like a diamond, for instance. They say at one point is an excellent example, and it works well because of the regular structure of, like, what makes it a crystal is like the particles are very, very regular, and then the entity can become similarly regular. And so I think that's what they're talking about here, is like the healer, the person who's using the crystal removes distortion to a certain extent, whereby their crystalline structure can also utilize like a crystal itself and like produce healing effects.
I find it so fascinating because one of the things that kind of gave me a charge, I guess, when I first landed here in Nashville, or even before I landed here, having never been here, was this whole notion of all these crystals that live in the ground and around this area, you know, that are natural. And I think I've got to wonder if that's, you know, a huge reason that Asheville became such a spiritual hub, with the crystals that are naturally found in and around the earth here in this geographic location. But I kind of wondered from that too. Would you sense too that, like, as individual people, an individual being, like a certain crystal would heal me differently than it would heal another being, have certain properties that maybe resonate with my own vibration, so to speak, as opposed to other people? Or are there some that, have you all experienced like being able to work with a particular crystal that seems to really have some powerful effects or healing properties, or that just speak to you? I've I've attempted myself to kind of go down this path of crystal healing, but I always seem to wind up bumping into, like, it's not pinging with me and it's feeling forced and constricted, so I leave it alone. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because I truly think this is what makes Asheville such, one of the many reasons it's such a unique place, is the crystals, are the crystals.
Yeah, Aaron, jump in.
I think what Ra has to say about different types of crystals and their qualities is that there's truth to that the different types of crystals do have like maybe useful for different kinds of healing and manifestation work, and that there are some crystals that are sort of like Swiss Army knife, like the diamond apparently is like incredibly diverse in terms of what kinds of works it can be used in. And I think what they also say, though, is that really the thing to focus on is the person wielding the crystal and their intentions. Like that, in some ways, is even more important than the type of crystal being used. And they seem to, that this session seems to underscore that. it seems like they say that the one who is wielding the crystal as a crystallized being is the critical component in working with crystals. It's like the person, their energy body, the form, you know, like the condition of their energy body, the level at which they're, you know, they've done the work to remove their distortions, and their intention.
Yeah. Neil, you want to jump in?
Well, I was just thinking about our previous history in Atlantis. You know, I believe they talk about using crystals and potentially maybe using the crystals without being a crystallized entity. And that's like they were given the information, but then, you know, went the wrong way with it of not being crystallized themselves. And that was a mistake. But then I also think of like Ra saying crystal powered like craft too. I think that's something they use, and seems like there's a like huge amount of energy or some sort of crazy unlocking, more than healing, but the ability to use a crystal to power a city or something. And I don't know, that is a big question on top of the healing part.
If I'll respond, if that's okay. So Neil,
Yeah,
that Rob literally says that in the very next question. Dawn's like, "Can you teach us?" And Rob's like, "We tried that. That's we are now officially not allowed because of the distortions toward power, as well as creating life forms, as well as healing. So, you know, initial intention being healing, and we know the story. So the thing that stood out for me around this is each individual mind, body, spirit complex having its own level of distortion to work through. I feel like that gets into the pre-incarnative plan of like someone choosing their trauma, someone choosing their catalyst in life, and before we come in here. And some people, for their soul's growth, maybe getting, to use gaming analogies, that maybe to get their little character from level 1 to 10, if there's 50 levels, that may be that all that they're going to work with. That's their goal. That's their soul's journey and growth. For them, that could be tremendous amounts of growth. And that's this incarnation's plan for them. For others coming into this incarnation, having a spiritual gravity about them already, having had many incarnations, having had many levels of growth, may incarnate already at a level 10. And then we talk about the dual activated little ones coming in nowadays, getting, you know, pre-prepared in a sense for fourth density. They're coming in at a level 20, and these little ones are teaching us at this point, you know, as we're teaching them, they're teaching us. And so the use of physical crystals to me feels very linked towards, I feel like what Ra is saying with that is it's going to be different for everybody based on a whole lot of things, including just where that spirit, mind, body, spirit complex is coming in. So different crystals are going to have different abilities within that different. I've seen crystals, I've done crystal gridding on a person's body for energy healing, and I've watched them physically break laying on a person while they're breathing. That's the equivalent of taking a hammer to it on the ground. It's literally cracked in half. And the understanding is that it's absorbed so much in a vibration. It reminds me of the opera singers that can break a crystalline wine glass with their voice. It's a vibration that resonates in a certain way within a certain form, aka in this crystalline structure. And when that vibration hits and bounces back, it's carrying a vibratory weight. There's inertia behind it that is like a sideways force of gravity. It's a force that each crystal upon each person's mind, body, spirit complex is going to resonate differently. So the same crystal that I use for my own healing process is not necessarily going to be a good fit for someone else. I might be using someone else's that wants a crystal grid energy healing on them. I choose differently per person. I feel out which ones want to be used. I've had to cognitively move out of the way, because I might go, oh, malachite's great for the heart. Malachite's great for the green ray energy. And that might not be what works for that person, where I'm cognitively thinking, this should work. This doesn't feel right though. So I had to reassess as I grew and learned and gained wisdom around the knowledge, knowledge turned to wisdom in this case, feeling my way through that. So I feel that the crystals are in essence the same way. And just a quick side note on the practical, one thing that we know, the Appalachians are full of crystals of varying heavy hitters too, like emeralds and fluorite and rubies and sapphire and all sorts, right? One thing that's lesser known is that we are literally sitting on top of the largest quartz deposit in the world. There is a massive, giant piece of quartz underneath all of the close to 2 billion year old rock that we're working with. So that it's a whole, it's that and then some, just to geek out on that little piece. And around awakening and this being like a chakra for Gaia, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot more to it. There's always more to it.
Yeah. Let me just chime in right quick and then we'll get to you, Erin. One thing that I would say from my perspective, Caroline, and just to kind of agree with Nia, like I would say trust your feeling. Like if it's not feeling right, don't do it. And if you want to try again, go to a gem shop and like feel it. Maybe there will be one that feels right to you, because I think that the feeling is really important. And also Kent is studying healing with gems, so he's a good resource to talk to. I think he's like in a specific course about it, or he's passionate about it. Erin, and then we need to get back into the reading to finish up soon.
Okay. Well, just really quick on the physical crystals front, I just want to share that I learned that a lot of physical crystals that come to market have been like pretty massively manipulated, either through heat or through chemical treatment. So that's something to know about. I think I mentioned this before, so I don't mean to repeat myself. But the point I was going to make was responding to BJ, the question about what is the what was it? What does a person need to go through to become a crystallized healer? What is the
removal of distortion,
removal of distortions? And the way that I think about that process is like distortions, meaning any place that we're stuck in thinking of something as separate from the creator, essentially. Whether that's a part of ourselves, a part of another person, a part of the universe, any part where we're fixated on something and not really in tune with how it connects to the living infinite one is a distortion. And it's another way of saying it is non-acceptance too. Like another distortion, creation of distortion, as I understand it, is non-acceptance. So in that light, a crystallized healer is someone who's just done enough inner work to accept and forgive themselves and the difficult things that have happened to them, to the point where they can like sit with anybody basically and not get constricted as the person is like telling what's unwell about them. The crystallized healer can just hear it and accept it and just hold them in unconditional love, because they've done the work. They don't, it doesn't trigger their own unattended woundedness. And I think that's essentially what a crystallized healer is. And one more thing, I know I don't want to talk too much, but in 2929, when Ra says the sympathetic vibration, the gateway to intelligent infinity is born of, shall we say, the sympathetic vibration in balanced state, accompanying the will to serve, the will to seek. I just thought that was beautiful. Just like the way to open the gateway to intelligent infinity, the way to like be in relationship with the infinite creator and use that capacity, that infinite capacity of love light, in co-creation with God, is like, may I be of service May I seek the truth. And the more we cultivate that will within ourselves, the more we vibrate that gateway and gain access to that power.
Yeah, totally. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say one more thing? Super fast.
Yeah, sure.
Just the idea that when a
You're
crystallized
going to speak
healer,
fast?
yeah, I'm gonna speak really fast, and hopefully this won't take too long. The idea that a crystallized healer uses the physical crystal as an analog to their violet ray, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Anyway.
It is fascinating. Yeah, it's really it inspires something for me. I feel drawn toward it. Like, oh, okay, need a crystal, need to do a thing. I don't know what yet. So anybody want to pick us up at 31 and carry to the end? The great thing about reading the end is you get to say the beautiful little prayer at the end.
I can read.
Telling it. Go ahead.
Okay. Questioner, is it possible at all for you to instruct us in specific uses of crystals? I am Ra. It is possible. There are, we consider, things which are not efficacious to tell you due to possible infringement upon your free will. Entities of the Confederation have erred in this in the past. The uses of the crystal, as you know, include the uses for healing, for power, and even for the development of life forms. We feel that it is unwise to offer instruction at this time, as your peoples have shown a tendency to use peaceful sources of power for disharmonious reasons. Questioner, I guess what we'd better get to then, now that we have traced the path of creation, at least down to the crystalline structure, we better concentrate on the evolution of thought and its seeking path to intelligent infinity. We have created in the major galaxy of the Logos a very large number of planets. As these planets develop, is it possible for you to give me an example of various planetary developments in what I would call a metaphysical sense, having to do with the development of consciousness and its polarities throughout the galaxy? In other words, I believe that some of these planets develop quite rapidly into higher density planets, and some take longer times. Can you give me some idea of that development? I am Ra. This will be the final full query of this session. The particular logos of your major galaxy has used a large portion of its coalesced material to reflect the beingness of the creator. In this way, there is much of your galactic system which does not have the progression of which you speak, but dwells spiritually as a portion of the logos. Of those entities upon which consciousness dwells, there is, as you surmise, a variety of time-space periods during which the higher densities of experience are attained by consciousness. Does this fulfill the requirement of your query? Questioner, I'll study it and possibly have something tomorrow, since I don't want to overtire the instrument. The instrument had a question if you have time for a short question, and I will read it. The instrument does not desire to do physical healing work. She already does spiritual balancing by hands. Can she read the private healing material without doing physical healing? I'm assuming that she means, can she read it without creating problems in her life pattern? She does not wish to incur lessening of positive polarity. Can she read this material under those conditions? I am Ra. We shall speak shortly due to the fact that we are attempting to conserve this instrument's vital energies during the 3-month period of which we have spoken. This entity has an experiential history of healing on levels other than the so-called physical. Thus, it is acceptable that this material be read. However, the exercise of fire shall never be practiced by this instrument, as it is used in the stronger form for the physical healing. Is there any short query further before we close? Questioner, is there anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or improve the contact? I am Ra. You are conscientious. The entity is well aligned. I am Ra. I leave you now in the love and the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite creator. Adonai.
Thanks, Sean. So 2932 is real juicy.
Is this back when Ra was giving the percentages? And he was like, oh yeah, and also by the way, there's some did he say planetary spheres? He said there's something about either stars or planets that don't lie within the regular. So if I remember correctly, Dawn was like, oh, can you break down the percentages of like densities?
Yeah, right.
And then Ra is like, oh, let me give you all the percentages except 6, because I can't give you 6, but you can just subtract it, figure it out. And then he was like, oh, also there's a bunch of planets that don't fall. It was some percentage. It wasn't that, was it? I don't remember what percentage it was that don't fall within the standard. I don't know, remember how I worded it. Standard evolution, the densities, the evolution of the densities, something like that. So is that this? Is that linking also this where he says, does this just mean like a big portion of the galaxy is just not being used for evolution? It's just hanging out in the logos with the creator. I don't know why. But
Yeah. Well, this is what Aaron was referring to earlier about that may be connected to why some suns are not logoi. Yeah.
When it may be synonymous.
Haven't cracked it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay. Go ahead.
This large portion of its coalesced material that they mention in 2932 may be the same portion of our galaxy before there was a veil. Like it may be the same thing. There's much of your galactic system which does not have the progression of which you speak. Progression meaning, spiritual evolution of mind, body, spirit complexes, or planets, basically planetary evolution.
But there was progression.
There was. That's right. That's true. So maybe it's not the same thing. It's almost like the picture I get is that at the very center of the galaxy, there are suns and maybe also planets that are just like shining the light of the creator, like in an angelic way. They're just
right.
expressing the love of the creator, and there's no evolution happening. Everything, all of the livingness, all the beingness, all the consciousness that's experiencing that experience is just the creator's consciousness. There is no spiritual evolution taking place. And then maybe outside of that, there's this sort of mind, body, spirit complex is just beginning to take place, but they're not veiled. And so they take a long time to evolve back to the creator. And then there's the third condition would be the veiled condition that we're experiencing. Maybe, I mean, I'm not suggesting this is true, but they do feel like they might be distinct qualities, and specifically having to do with evolution, like what kind of spiritual evolution is taking place, if at all.
Are we the only planet that has gone through the experience of being veiled, like Earth?
No, I think it's like once the veil was sort of discovered, it became like a favorite, tool of logoic creation. I think it's the standard practice at this point. Is what we learned from Ra.
Because my understanding was that so many planets had no veil, but then there's not this ability to live in a polarity, to experience polarity, to grow. And so I guess maybe they were in love light, but it was just kind of complacent. So my understanding is the veiled experience here on Earth was done on purpose so that we would experience this polarity to grow into infinite light.
Right.
So maybe there's some parts of like the infinite creator where there's this planets in our galactic system which don't need to progress. Maybe they've just always been the love light, because that gives the creator another experience. I've got an experience with those that are veiled, those that are, I don't know, just the whole octave. I'm thinking of like the whole range, the whole octave.
Yeah.
You know, but I wonder if some of the ones that are in that particular, like in the answer to 2932, I wonder if entities that have that, you know, they're already all that is. I wonder if they experienced what we are in terms of a progression, evolution, consciousness, to where the creator experienced all of those levels, so to speak, with them, and now they are the all that is, for lack of a better term. That they didn't have, maybe they had to incur lessons for growth, just like we are. I mean, there's no real answer, but it piques my interest, because I'm curious if some of these systems were created simply for the creator to know itself in that way, that they didn't, these beings did not have to experience lessons and incur growth, physical healing, and all of that. Yeah. I'm just blabbing at this point, sorry.
No, it's a great, I think it's a great and central inquiry about, you know, this part of the material.
Yeah, me too.
The sense that I have is like in these galaxies, or sorry, in these portions of the creation, when the particular logos of your major galaxy has used a large portion of its coalesced material to reflect the beingness of the creator.
Yeah, love that sentence.
It's amazing. And so this is what I imagine. I imagine like that, whatever's going on there, the creator has an idea, and it probably includes solar and probably even planetary life. And the planetary life might even have first and what we think of as first and second density creation on it. But generally speaking, the sense that I get is the creator kind of knows what it loves, and then manifests it in form. And there's not a lot of surprise in that. But then once, like where we are, when there's this possibility of the logos extending free will to third density entities, I feel like our portion of creation is generating novelty for the creator in a way that's profound. Like, I think there's so much expansion of the creator's experience of itself because of that extension of free will. And there's so much surprise involved. And the surprise isn't always good surprise. I mean, it's not always pleasant. You know, like the surprise is sometimes like, whoa, those motherfuckers can war with each other. Dang, I didn't know I was capable of that. But that's a part of the stretching of the creator's knowledge of itself. And in that is acceleration of the capacity. I think it's an acceleration of the capacity for the creator to know itself. And it also seems to have a quickening effect in third density.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hear and resonate with your response. I just wonder, you know, the infinite creator looks upon this density that we're living in, and there's just so many, I mean, the variety of levels of consciousness and lack thereof is just so massive. And like, oh, there's disease, there's war, there's famine, there's poverty. So I wonder if that experience, the creator maybe didn't have that experience in other planetary systems, but here we've manifested disease, we've manifested poverty, and all the things that come with being a human. It's just amazing to me that any of us had the remembrance of who we are in this particular realm of which we exist. I just think it's really beautiful. And anyway, the creator certainly seeing a lot here on this plane as I see it. So anyway, thank you for your response. That was, I totally resonate.
Well, any closing thoughts?
I had one more thing, but it's a horrible thing to end on, so I'll just skip it. It's just transient is all I mean by that. It's not very
Okay.
deep.
Maybe you can pop it in our thread later.
Yeah,
Or
I will.
it
I'll
looks
do
like
that.
Neil is gonna jump. Great. Do you want to say
I
something?
I just had one thing. Like Aaron, when you do the hearts and it shows the heart, what happens if you give a middle finger?
Oh yeah,
Neil?
I won't try that, but I will. Maybe I'll do that on
That's-
my own and let you know.
Speaking of transient, that's funny. Well, I feel called to end us with a prayer as well as beginning us with a prayer. So how about we all take a breath together? And intend for whatever benefit has been generated in our own lives, whatever light we experience from gathering in this way, from accessing this material. May that light, may that benefit radiate out and support all on this planet and beyond. Thank you to our guides, thank you to our allies, and thank you to all of us gathered here. Love you.
Thanks, Beach. That was nice.
See you next week. Good. Love y'all.
You guys.
Bye.